Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving straight into the bustling, microscopic world of the cell. But, we aren't just going to look at it as some static biological blob. Instead, we're going to see how it operates exactly like a highly coordinated manufacturing plant. I'm talking about executive offices issuing blueprints, a dedicated cleanup crew taking out the trash, the whole shebang. You are absolutely going to be amazed at the sheer industrial efficiency happening inside you right this very second.
But before we officially start our factory tour, let's challenge our perception of scale for a second. Let's ask a fundamental question about the limits of human vision. What do we actually call the ability of the naked eye to see two very close objects as separate and distinct from one another?
Well, it's called the limit of resolution. Imagine drawing two tiny dots on a piece of paper. If you look at them from about 25 centimeters away, once those dots get closer than 0.1 millimeters, our eyes simply cannot resolve them. They just blur right into a single point. And because a typical cell is vastly smaller than 0.1 millimeters, this massive biological industry remains entirely hidden from our unaided sight. I mean, we literally need microscopes just to see the factory doors.
So the whole premise of our tour is perfectly summarized by this beautifully simple quote from our source material. A cell is like a tiny living factory, with each of its parts doing a specific job. We're going to anchor ourselves to this idea throughout the entire explainer today because it completely demystifies all those complex organelles packed inside.
Okay, so here's our itinerary for today. 1. The discovering the microscopic world. 2. The factory security perimeter. 3. A tour of the factory floor. 4. Power and waste management. And finally, 5. How the factory expands.
All right, let's kick things off with part 1, discovering the microscopic world, primitive versus modern factories.
We really need to look at the basic blueprints of these microscopic factories, which actually come in two very different architectural styles based on their evolutionary history. On one side, we have prokaryotic cells. Think of these like your primitive open-floor factories without any walled-off departments. They're super small, typically just 1 to 10 micrometers, and they lack a well-defined membrane-bound nucleus. On the flip side, we have eukaryotic cells. These are the modern, complex factories that make up plants and animals. They are vastly larger, ranging from 10 to 100 micrometers, and feature highly specialized enclosed rooms, or what we call membrane-bound organelles. For the rest of our tour today, we'll be walking through one of these advanced eukaryotic factories.
Moving right along to part 2. The factory security perimeter, specifically the cell membrane. Before we can even step foot onto the main factory floor, we have to pass through the ultimate security gate. Structurally, the cell membrane is ridiculously thin, only about 7 to 10 nanometers thick. It's a fluid mosaic made of a lipid bilayer, which is basically 2 layers of special fat molecules with proteins embedded directly into them. This membrane completely defines the individuality of the cell and tightly controls its borders. It's selectively permeable, meaning the microscopic security guards let specific, necessary materials pass through while strictly blocking out all the unwanted stuff.
Now, if you take a look at classic potato slice experiments, you can actually visualize a process called osmosis. This shows us exactly how water naturally bypasses those selectively permeable security gates. By placing hollowed-out potato halves in plain water and adding salt or sugar to the inside, you physically watch water move across the plant's cell membranes just to balance out the concentration. It's a real-time look at how materials move across the factory's perimeter. And the craziest part? The cell doesn't even have to expend any energy to do it.
Okay, part 3, tour of the factory floor, production and assembly.
Now that we're finally past security, let's step inside the cytoplasm. That's the jelly-like fluid filling up the space, and meet the organelles running the main manufacturing production line. Everything in a eukaryotic cell starts in the nucleus. This is the executive office, and it's wrapped in a double-layered membrane with special pores. Inside this office, you're going to find chromosomes made of DNA and specific proteins. The functional segments of this DNA are called genes. These genes are the ultimate master blueprint, dictating exactly what the factory needs to build to survive.
Let's track this down the assembly line step by step. First, the coded instructions leave the nucleus. Second, they arrive at the endoplasmic reticulum, or ER, and the ribosomes. Ribosomes are the tiny protein factories, while the ER is this sprawling manufacturing floor where proteins and lipids are synthesized. Finally, step 3, these newly manufactured products move over to the Golgi apparatus to be modified, packaged up, and shipped out.
Just look at the massive surface area of these stacked, folded structures. You've got the highly folded network of the endoplasmic reticulum, and then the flattened, sac-like structures of the Golgi apparatus, packaging materials into little bubbles called vesicles. It is an architecture designed specifically for high-volume manufacturing and hyper-efficient cellular shipping. Actually, fun fact here, the cell's post office gets its name from an Italian scientist named Camillo Golgi. He was the guy who first spotted this thread-like network way back in 1898. And get this, he discovered it while studying the nerve cells of a barn owl. Early microscopes were so weak back then that a lot of scientists actually doubted Golgi's discovery at first. But decades later, powerful electron microscopes proved he hit the nail right on the head. Moving on to Part 4, Power and Waste Management, Keeping the Lights On. A busy factory floor producing all these proteins and lipids requires absolutely massive amounts of power. So keeping the lights on are the mitochondria. These act as the dedicated cellular power plants. They have inner membranes that are folded into finger-like projections called crista, which vastly increases the surface area for chemical reactions. Here, glucose is broken down to release energy in the form of ATP. ATP is essentially the raw energy currency keeping every single machine in the factory running smoothly.
But generating power and manufacturing goods inevitably creates trash. So how does the cell prevent waste from just piling up inside? It uses two key structures. First up, lysosomes. These guys are an aggressive cleanup crew. They're single membrane-bound sacs filled with powerful enzymes that break down unwanted proteins, damaged organelles, and even foreign agents. Second, we have vacuoles. Now, in plant cells, there's usually one large central vacuole acting as a massive storage sac for water, minerals, and waste. By filling up with water, the vacuole maintains pressure, which keeps the plant cell firm and stops the whole plant from wilting.
Which brings us to our final stop, Part 5, How the Factory Expands Through Cell Division.
How does a single microscopic factory franchise expand to create an entire complex organism? Well, the factory grows and replaces damaged sections through division, utilizing two main strategies. Mitosis is the process where a parent cell flawlessly clones itself, turning out two genetically identical daughter cells. This is what your body uses for general growth, repair, and maintenance. On the other hand, meiosis is used when it's time to create entirely new, diverse offspring during sexual reproduction.
To put this maintenance and repair cycle into perspective, every single day, an estimated hundreds of billions of cells in your body are completely replaced. That is almost 1% of your total cells turning over daily, just constantly dividing and replacing themselves in a highly controlled manner to keep your biological systems running flawlessly.
Stepping back from our whole factory metaphor for a second, these incredible operations all tie right into a unifying biological principle known as the classical cell theory. It states that all living organisms are made of one or more cells, that the cell is the basic unit of structure and function, and most importantly, that all cells arise from pre-existing cells. This single framework unites all life on Earth, from a simple bacterium to a giant redwood tree, and of course, to us.
So, I'll leave you with this fascinating thought. If all these microscopic factories are constantly dividing and growing, how do they know when it's time to finally close their doors forever? The truth is, cells actually have a definite lifespan and undergo programmed cell death. It's a genetically regulated dismantling of the factory when it's no longer needed, like when your fingers are being shaped in the womb. But what happens when they lose that control and flat out refuse to stop dividing? Well, that uncontrolled division is what leads to tumors and cancer. It's a delicate, beautiful, and sometimes precarious balance. Thanks for joining this explainer on the incredible microscopic factory inside you. Keep questioning and keep exploring.